Hello, it's Andrew here again, and this is episode 71, and I'm going to have a sip of my coffee before I start. I'm not sure whether it's a long short black or a short long black, whatever. Matthew chapter 4 verses 1 to 11. This is the third and final in our little part on the temptations of Jesus in the desert. And so we again will read the text, starting at verse 1. Let's see where we are here. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterward he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you. And on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and said to him, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only Him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. As I said, this is part 3 of 3, and we're dealing with the final temptation today. As a reminder that, as I said at the beginning of each of these, that these temptations have to be real. They had to be real temptations for Jesus, otherwise there is very little point. And the other thing is that they are also archetypal, which means that they have a kind of universal message. They speak to each of us. They're not just about what's happening for Jesus, but each one has a message for each of us. And as I said yesterday, we can interpret each of these challenges in quite different ways. And I'd imagine that as you were hearing it today, you would have heard something different from what I'm about to share. We each hear different things, and we might hear different things on different days. So this is what I've been musing with over the last day or so. Our first one we looked at was, and my take on it, the turning the loaves to the stone to loaves of bread, was that the little things matter. That integrity is formed and found in the small things. And our second one, yesterday, we looked at the experience of despair that is common to humanity. This call for Jesus to jump from the top of the temple. Jesus faced it, and so do we. And we can walk our way through these things if we allow Him to walk with us through our sense of hopelessness. I would imagine that's something that we all feel from time to time. And so today we come to the final temptation. And we pick it up in verse 8, and I'm going to read it again, but I'm going to have another wee sip. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, "All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only Him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. I think the first thing that we can notice here is that there is no "if you are." What we see here is a direct frontal assault. All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. There's no "if you are the Son of God." It's almost as if that has been parked, that's been pushed aside, that's been forgotten. That's implicit in this an awareness within Satan that this is and could be the Son of God. That this is. Let's assume that it is. Let's see if we can steer him off course. Let's not call into question. We've had those two goes this time. Let's try another way of getting him off course. All these I will give you if you will just bow down and worship me. I wonder how tempting it was for Jesus. You can start to imagine all the things that could be offered to him. The first was that it offers an easy way out. An easy way out. It offers a way to avoid the pain and struggle of the next 3 years. It offers a way to avoid the cross and all that that implies. You don't have to do it this way. Just because it's hard, it doesn't mean that this is what God wants for you. Just because it's difficult, it doesn't mean that you have to head down this path. God doesn't always want you to do the difficult things. And maybe that's the voice that is quietly working away within his heart. The voice of the tempter to lead him off his destiny. And you know, there are times when that is absolutely true. There are times when it's absolutely true. Not here, because Jesus knows what's ahead of him. He also knows what he is having to give up and what he's having to give allegiance to. And that in itself are pointers that everything about this is wrong. It's wrong. One of the other options that occurs to me is that, and I could imagine this very much, is offering the option that this is the noble thing to do. Just think of all the good you could do. You don't have to wait. You don't have to, wander around like a peasant for the next 3 years being miserable and having this thing end badly. Just think of all the good you could do if you said yes to this one-time offer. It's not going to come again, just this one-time offer. Just think of all the good you could do. Just think if you had the authority now, the power now to rule the whole world. What a difference you could make. What changes you could work. Amazing how it would be. Just think of how wonderful it would be. It's another possibility. Could be also offer the path of prosperity. Oh, come on, Jesus. It hasn't been easy up until now. But you deserve a break. You are a holy man. We all know that. We all know that. And as we have known, it's part of Israel's history. Holiness brings with it prosperity. You deserve to be rich. You deserve to be powerful. Now, you might think that I'm kidding and just having a poke at the prosperity gospel, which I am. But I'm not kidding. Because you can see it in the New Testament. You can see it in the story of the rich young ruler. And it isn't so much the story itself, it's the reaction of the disciples to the story. When this man went away sad, because he wasn't prepared to sell all that he had to follow Jesus, because he was extremely rich and powerful. Jesus said to the disciples how hard it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. And they were genuinely shocked. They said, what? If a rich person can't enter, then who can? And you've got to ask yourself, what's behind that? Well, behind that is this idea that you're rich because God has prospered you. You're rich because you've been particularly worthy and particularly holy. You're not necessarily rich because you've ripped people off. You're not rich because you haven't paid your labourers adequately. You're not rich because you don't pay your bills on time and just keep accumulating. No, you're rich because God has prospered you. And Jesus calls the lie to that. He calls the lie to that. It doesn't mean that God is against people being rich. But let's just be a little bit careful before we actually start attributing and relating the two as being correlative, as being causative. You're rich because you're holy, because that's what could be going on here. But then we need to start thinking about what's on the other side of this. Ultimately, Satan is offering what is not his to give. Now we know that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. He's the prince of this world. Yeah, maybe, but it's temporary. It's passing. It doesn't last. He's not the owner. And he's only got hooks into people while they're alive, not when it's over. And it's relatively short. And so what he's doing here, he's offering short-term gain, but long-term grief. But isn't that how many of us live? We're always just living for the short term. We don't actually looking at the consequences down the track of this choice that we're making now. We're not looking at what we're going to have to pay at the other end. We're saying, yeah, but I want it now. I need it now. I deserve it now. We don't look at where this is going to end up for us. And that's actually really, really important. Because he's being offered a lifetime, a short lifetime perhaps, of what might look like positive opportunity and benefit, but an eternity of grief, an eternity of grief. And he's offering what is transient and empty in place, of what is eternal and real. I always think about those words of Jim Elliot. They weren't his originally, but he quoted them in his diary just before he died at the hand of native Indians in South America in a cross-cultural encounter that went badly. He was a missionary in, I think it was in Ecuador, in 1956. He and his team, they were all ultimately died. But as a result of that, the tribe which he was reaching ultimately came to faith. But the thing that he wrote was this: he's no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. There's something in that. He was willing to see the long term, not just the short term. He was willing to see the long term, and he knew that if it cost him his life, that was okay. That actually good was going to come, and it did. And yet we're so often so interested just in the short term, in the immediate return. We're like Esau, who's willing to, in the old words of the King James, I think, sell his soul sell his birthright for a mess of pottage. And the question is, what are you willing to sell your birthright for? What am I willing to sell my birthright for? Well, the price here is given. All Jesus has to do is cast himself to the ground before Satan and worship him. Unfortunately, in this, there's an element of pledging allegiance. There's an element of acknowledging this one has now the authority. This one is in control. You are giving yourself to this one. And that's a question for all of us. What price your soul? What are you prepared to sell it for? What is a price that's high enough for you to sell your soul to? In Matthew 16, which we'll get to eventually, in verse 24, Jesus tells his disciples, if you want to become my followers, you have to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life, and the word that's used there for life is suke, it's actually soul. It's more than just this little bit now, it's a deeper sense of who you are. To me, I always interpret soul as to being the sum and the centre. It is a sense of the whole of us, but it's also the essence of us. Those of you who want to save their soul will lose it. And those who lose their soul for my sake will find it. For what will it profit if you gain the whole world? This is what Jesus has been offered. And forfeit your soul. Well, what will you give in return for your soul? And the thing is that we don't do this at a conscious level. We don't sell out our souls at a conscious level. We don't give them away at a conscious, intentional level, not usually anyway. What we do, though, is we fill our lives with the trivial. We fill our lives with the things that don't matter. We fill our lives pursuing the almighty dollar, of getting a bigger house, of a nicer holiday house, of having better holidays over in Bali and other parts of the planet. We can sell our soul for the dream, and in the end it doesn't deliver. It promises much and gives us back little. We can sacrifice our integrity, and we sell out to personal gain. And I notice that Christians are no better at not doing this than others. You can see some of the most horrendous business practices among my Christian brothers and sisters because they see an advantage. And some of them will argue, well, it doesn't really matter, the world's all going to hell anyway, so we take what we can. And so we turn away from decency. We can turn away from compassion. We can turn away from care for the little people, those who are dispossessed, those who are without a voice. I took a funeral last week from a very interesting human being. She was always interested in the cracked pots and chipped plates, and she saw beauty in the things that were damaged. And she was one who stood up for those who had no voice. And she was involved in the Hare Krishna and the Buddhists. She was involved in all sorts of things. But it seems to me there's something here that strikes at the heart of the gospel. What are we prepared to give our lives to? Or what are we going to sell out for? And so we have the opportunity to say, actually, I want to give my life to something bigger than just to my own comfort. And so if we find ourselves turning away from compassion. And the challenge for me as I engage with this last temptation is, how am I filling in my days? What distractions am I using to fill up the time? Where am I going to avoid the things that actually would be more profitable and more useful, but often require some hard work to be able to give my life a deeper sense of meaning? I, until the lockdown, would spend a reasonable amount of my life in rest homes. Most rest homes probably all have an activities officer. That's what they call them. But in some places they're more honest than that. They call them what they are, diversional therapists. What does that mean? And you may have or will hear me talk about this before. Well, they're diverting them from the reality that they're here to wait for God. That they're here because they're on the last lap of their lives. They're here because ultimately they're here to die. And so we must distract them from that reality. I wonder how many of us spend our lives being distracted from all we're here for. The true purpose that God might have had for us. You might be thinking to yourself, well, surely though, Andrew, God wants me to be happy, doesn't he? Not so much. I don't think that your happiness is God's primary concern. I'm sorry to break that to you if this is a new thought to you. I don't believe that your happiness is God's primary concern. He's more concerned about your character. He's more concerned about who you're becoming. He's more concerned of your willingness to demonstrate generosity and a richness of being towards others. That you can learn and know a measure of compassion. God is more concerned about your character than he is about your happiness. What I can promise you is that God wants you to be whole. He wants you to be whole. He wants all of us to be whole. And in wholeness we find joy. In